I'm Louis, 34. And after 12 years of grueling 60-hour work weeks in finance, I finally bought my dream penthouse overlooking Central Park. My sister Amanda has always gotten whatever she wanted from our parents, but when she declared my home should be hers because she needed it more, I never imagined how far she'd go. Last week I woke up to security alerts at 2 in the morning. There she was on camera with a locksmith trying to break into my home. Before I dive into this wild family drama, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories about standing up to toxic family members. Growing up in an upper-middle-class suburban neighborhood outside Boston, my childhood looked picture-perfect from the outside. My father worked as a successful attorney at a prestigious law firm, often bringing home cases to review late into the night. My mother chose to stay home after having children, dedicating herself to managing our household and raising Amanda and me. My sister is 2 years younger than me, and from my earliest memories there was always something different about how our parents treated us. The first time I noticed this difference was during my 6th birthday party. I had invited friends from school and was excited about the small science kit my parents had given me that morning. As we gathered around the cake, Amanda suddenly threw a tantrum because she wasn't getting any presents. Instead of explaining to her that it wasn't her birthday, my parents quickly disappeared into their bedroom and emerged with a brand new doll for her. While my friends looked confused, my parents explained that they didn't want Amanda to feel left out. This pattern continued throughout our childhood. In elementary school, I developed a passion for mathematics and science. I would spend hours working on extra credit assignments and projects, often winning school competitions. When I brought home a first-place certificate from the regional science fair in 5th grade, my parents glanced at it briefly before turning their attention to Amanda's art project that received a participation award. "Look how creative your sister is," they'd say, hanging her drawing prominently on the refrigerator while my certificate went into a drawer. Amanda quickly learned that she could manipulate situations to her advantage. When we were teenagers, I once confronted her after discovering she had taken money from my savings jar. Instead of admitting it, she ran to our parents crying, claiming I had accused her of stealing. Despite the evidence, my parents scolded me for bullying my sister and suggested I should be more generous with my allowance anyway. This dynamic extended to responsibilities as well. While I was expected to maintain perfect grades, help with household chores, and eventually get a part-time job in high school, Amanda was rarely held accountable for her commitments. If she failed a class, it was because the teacher didn't understand her learning style. If she didn't complete her chores, it was because she had such a busy social calendar. The double standard was glaring, but any time I pointed it out, I was labeled as jealous or uncooperative. By the time I was 17, I had mapped out my escape plan. I applied to colleges on the opposite coast, seeking scholarships and financial aid without involving my parents. When I received acceptance letters from several top universities, including a partial scholarship to my first choice, my parents seemed almost surprised by my ambition. "We always thought Amanda would be the one to get a scholarship with her artistic talents," my father commented during what should have been a celebratory dinner. I left home at 18, heading to college with barely enough money for the first semester. While my parents offered to help financially, I was determined to make it on my own. I worked 3 part-time jobs while maintaining a full course load in finance. Each semester was a struggle, but I was driven by the desire to prove myself and build a life where my achievements would be recognized on their own merit. During those college years, my contact with family was limited. I would call home once a month, usually speaking briefly with my mother, who would spend most of the conversation updating me on Amanda's latest activities. According to these updates, Amanda had enrolled in and dropped out of 3 different programs at the local community college each time because the program wasn't fulfilling her creative potential. Meanwhile, she continued living at home rent-free, with our parents covering all her expenses. When I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in finance, only my mother attended the ceremony. My father stayed home because Amanda had a minor cold and needed his support. Rather than letting this diminish my accomplishment, I used it as motivation. That same day, I accepted an entry-level position at a prestigious financial firm in New York, determined to build my success story with or without family recognition. My first year in New York was nothing short of brutal. The entry-level position at Wilson & Marshall Financial demanded 14-hour days, often extending into weekends. I shared a tiny apartment in Queens with 3 other recent graduates commuting 90 minutes each way to save on rent. My starting salary barely covered my student loans rent and the professional wardrobe required for client meetings. But unlike many of my colleagues who came from wealthy families with financial safety nets, failure wasn't an option for me. I quickly established a reputation as the associate willing to take on the projects nobody wanted. When senior analysts needed someone to stay late to prepare reports for morning meetings, I volunteered. When holiday coverage was needed, I worked through Thanksgiving and Christmas using the holiday bonus to pay down my student loans. While my peers complained about the workload, I saw each assignment as an opportunity to learn and prove my value. By my 3rd year, this strategy began paying off. I was promoted to junior analyst with a modest salary increase that finally allowed me to move into my own studio apartment in Brooklyn. The space was barely 500 square feet, but it represented progress. That same month, I found out through a brief call with my mother that Amanda had decided to become an influencer. My parents had purchased expensive camera equipment and funded a brand-building trip to Bali for her new career venture. Rather than dwelling on the disparity in support, I channeled my energy into building my financial knowledge. I lived well below my means, investing over 40% of my income in a diversified portfolio I carefully researched during weekends. While colleagues splurged on expensive dinners and nightclub outings, I prepared meals at home and spent free time studying investment strategies. Many thought I was missing out on the New York experience, but I was playing the long game. My dedication caught the attention of William Fairchild, one of the firm's senior partners. After I successfully identified an overlooked investment opportunity that generated significant returns for a major client, he took me under his wing. "You remind me of myself 30 years ago," he told me during a rare lunch meeting. "Hungry, disciplined, and patient." With his mentorship, my career trajectory accelerated considerably. By my 7th year at the firm, I had been promoted 3 more times, eventually becoming the youngest senior investment strategist in the company's history. My salary had increased tenfold since my starting position, and my investment portfolio had grown substantially through careful management. For the first time since leaving home, I allowed myself to think about fulfilling a personal dream, owning premium real estate in Manhattan. I spent 6 months researching the market, viewing properties, and building relationships with real estate agents specialized in luxury properties. When a penthouse in a newly renovated pre-war building overlooking Central Park came on the market, something just clicked. The 3-bedroom space featured floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic park views, a chef's kitchen with top-of-the-line appliances, and a private rooftop terrace. The asking price was steep, but with my savings and a mortgage approval leveraging my excellent credit score and stable income, it was within reach. The day I signed the closing papers and received the keys was perhaps the proudest moment of my life. Standing alone in the empty living room as sunset painted Central Park in golden hues, I felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. This space represented not just financial success, but vindication of my life choices and work ethic. For once, I wished my parents could see what I had achieved without their support or recognition. After settling into the penthouse and furnishing it with carefully selected pieces that balanced luxury with comfort, I found myself thinking more about family. Despite everything, there was still a part of me that wanted to share my success with them, perhaps naively hoping they would finally acknowledge my accomplishments. After much consideration, I decided to reach out and invite them to visit my new home. The invitation was met with surprising enthusiasm. According to my mother, Amanda was between projects after her influencer career had failed to gain traction, and they were all eager for a family reunion in the big city. I arranged for their flights and prepared the guest bedrooms, looking forward to what I hoped would be a turning point in our relationship. Little did I know that this attempt at reconciliation would trigger a chain of events that would ultimately force me to reevaluate everything about my family dynamic. When my family arrived at my building, the doorman ushered them up to the penthouse level. I waited nervously in the foyer, unsure of what to expect after nearly 3 years of minimal contact. My father entered first, his posture stiff but eyes widening as he took in the marble entry hall and the glimpse of the living room beyond. My mother followed immediately, rushing to embrace me before stepping back to look around in obvious amazement. Amanda entered, last designer sunglasses perched on her head despite the overcast day. While my parents made appreciative comments about the space, Amanda remained oddly silent, her eyes scanning every detail with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. When I offered to give them a tour, she finally spoke. "I guess finance bros really do make obscene amounts of money," she said with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Throughout the tour, my parents asked questions about the neighborhood, the building amenities, and how I'd managed to afford such a property. I explained my career progression and investment strategy, feeling a rare moment of pride as my father nodded with what seemed like genuine respect. Amanda, meanwhile, trailed behind us, taking photos of every room and occasionally making comments like, "This would make such amazing content for social media." During dinner at the formal dining table overlooking the twinkling city lights, Amanda suddenly became animated, peppering me with questions about my social life in New York. Did I know any celebrities? Had I been to exclusive clubs? Could I introduce her to important people in the media industry? The shift in her interest felt abrupt and calculated. When I mentioned that I mostly focused on work and had a small circle of close friends, she looked disappointed. Later that evening, after our parents had retired to their guest room, Amanda cornered me on the terrace. "So this is what selling your soul to corporate America gets you," she said, gesturing at the view. Before I could respond, her tone shifted completely. "Louis, I've been meaning to talk to you about something important," she continued, suddenly vulnerable. "My career is at a critical junction right now." Over the next hour, Amanda revealed that her influencer business was not just stalling but failing completely. Despite our parents' financial support, she had accumulated significant debt from purchasing expensive equipment, clothing, and travel experiences for content that generated minimal engagement. Additionally, she had recently broken up with her boyfriend, who had been covering most of their rent. She was effectively homeless and drowning in credit card debt. "I just need a fresh start," she explained, eyes welling with tears that seemed to appear on command. "If I could stay here just for a few weeks while I regroup and create some amazing content in this gorgeous space, I know I could turn everything around." When I hesitated, she added, "We're family, Louis. Isn't this what family does for each other?" Against my better judgment, I agreed to let her stay temporarily. I set clear conditions: a maximum stay of 1 month, no unauthorized guests, respect for my privacy and work schedule, and no social media posts identifying my home or address. Amanda hugged me tightly, thanking me profusely for saving her life and promising to be the perfect houseguest. My parents left 2 days later, expressing how happy they were that Amanda and I were reconnecting. My mother pulled me aside before their departure. "It's so good to see you taking care of your sister," she said. "She's always been more fragile than you." There was an implied expectation in her words that made me uneasy, but I dismissed the feeling. Within days, the boundaries I had established began to crumble. I returned from work one evening to find 3 strangers in my living room drinking my rare whiskey collection, while Amanda conducted what she called a networking meeting. When I confronted her after they left, she became defensive. "These are important contacts, Louis. I thought you wanted to help me succeed." The following week, I discovered she had moved her belongings into the master bedroom while I was on a 2-day business trip. "The lighting is better for my morning routine videos," she explained casually. "You can use the guest room for a few days, right? It's not like you spend much time here anyway with your crazy work hours." Each confrontation followed the same pattern: my attempt to enforce boundaries, her initial defensiveness, followed by tears and emotional manipulation about family loyalty and her difficult situation. After 3 weeks of this escalating behavior, I firmly reminded her that our agreement was ending in 1 week, and she needed to make arrangements to move out. That evening, Amanda's approach changed dramatically. "Actually, I've been thinking," she said with unsettling confidence. "This place is really too big for one person. It makes more sense for me to stay here long term. I could even help with the mortgage." When I pointed out that her business wasn't generating any income, she waved dismissively. "Details. The point is, I need this place for my career more than you do. You're never even here to enjoy it." The conversation deteriorated rapidly as Amanda's entitlement became increasingly apparent. She suggested that I should be the one to move out since I only needed a place to sleep, while she needed a proper backdrop for her content creation. When I firmly refused, her expression hardened in a way I had never seen before. "You've always been selfish, Louis. Always thinking about yourself." The next morning, I woke early to prepare for an important client meeting. Entering my home office, I found drawers left open and papers disturbed. My financial documents, including mortgage statements, investment reports, and bank records, had been rifled through. When I confronted Amanda, she denied any knowledge, suggesting perhaps the cleaning service had been disorganized. That evening, I received a call from my father. His voice was stern as he accused me of living in excess while refusing to help my sister establish herself. Amanda told us everything, he said. How you flaunt your wealth but won't support family. We raised you better than this, Louis. When I tried to explain my perspective, he interrupted. Your sister needs that apartment for her business. You have the means to help her succeed, but you're choosing not to. It became clear that Amanda had fed our parents a distorted version of the situation, positioning herself as the victim of my selfishness. The final straw came when I returned home to find Amanda hosting a full photo shoot with a photographer, makeup artist, and assistant, all using my personal belongings as props. When I demanded everyone leave immediately, Amanda created a scene crying that I was sabotaging her one chance at a successful campaign. After everyone left, I calmly but firmly told Amanda she needed to be out by the end of the week. Her response chilled me. This isn't over, Louis. You've always had everything handed to you while I've struggled. It's time you shared your good fortune. One way or another, I'll get what I deserve. The next day she left while I was at work, taking with her several small valuable items from my collection and leaving the guest room in complete disarray. I changed the locks immediately, hoping this would be the end of the ordeal. Unfortunately, it was just the beginning of a campaign that would test not only my patience, but my entire conception of family. The week following Amanda's departure brought an unsettling silence. No calls from my parents, no messages from Amanda. I allowed myself to hope that perhaps she had accepted the situation and moved on. This brief peace was shattered when I received a text from a college friend asking if everything was okay between me and my sister. Confused, I asked what he meant. Check her Instagram, he replied. What I found stunned me. Amanda had created a series of posts featuring photos taken in my penthouse, carefully framed to suggest it was her home. The captions told a story of a brother who had used family connections to secure his position and wealth, then refused to help his struggling sister. Family should support each other. One caption read, but some people forget where they came from once they reach the top. The posts included enough details about my career and address to make me extremely uncomfortable, though she had craftily avoided making any directly false claims that could be considered defamation. The comment sections were filled with sympathetic responses condemning the unnamed brother who had abandoned his sister in her time of need. That evening, my mother called. Rather than addressing Amanda's public smear campaign, she immediately launched into why I should reconsider letting Amanda stay at the Penthouse. She just needs a stable environment to build her brand, my mother insisted. You have that extra bedroom doing nothing but collecting dust. When I explained that Amanda had violated my privacy, gone through my financial documents, and was now posting misleading information about me online, my mother dismissed these concerns. She's just hurt and lashing out because she feels rejected. You've always been the strong one, Louis. You need to be understanding of her artistic temperament. Over the next few days, I received messages from extended family members and old friends, most expressing disappointment in how I was treating Amanda. It became clear she had been systematically contacting people in our shared circle, presenting a narrative that painted her as the victim of my callousness. The situation escalated when Amanda apparently told our parents that she had helped me get my job through connections she had made during her brief stint at an advertising agency years ago. This was completely fabricated, as Amanda had never had any connections in finance, but my parents readily believed her version. My father called to express his disappointment that I wouldn't acknowledge Amanda's role in my success. She's struggling while living in that tiny apartment your mother and I are helping her afford, he said sternly. Meanwhile, you have all that space going unused in a home she helped you get. She deserves to benefit from the connections she provided you. I was dumbfounded by this revision of history. Dad, Amanda had nothing to do with my career. I built this from nothing, working jobs you and Mom never even knew about during college, sleeping 4 hours a night while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. That's not how Amanda remembers it, he responded coldly. And frankly, your sister doesn't exaggerate or lie. You've always been jealous of the attention she received. The gaslighting was so profound, I found myself momentarily questioning my own memories. Had there been some connection I'd forgotten about, Had Amanda somehow played a role I had overlooked? It took reviewing my employment history and reconnecting with college mentors to reassure myself that my recollection was accurate. The campaign intensified when Amanda began telling family members and mutual acquaintances that the Penthouse was actually purchased with a trust fund that our grandparents had established for both of us, but that I had somehow manipulated the terms to exclude her. This was entirely fictional, as our grandparents had left modest inheritances that I had invested while Amanda had spent hers immediately on a luxury vacation. My parents called for a family dinner at their hotel during their next visit to New York, ostensibly to work things out. Hoping for resolution, I agreed to meet them. The dinner quickly revealed itself as an ambush intervention. Both parents took turns explaining how I had always been blessed with natural advantages while Amanda had struggled against adversity. They suggested a compromise where Amanda would move into the penthouse, and I would relocate to a smaller apartment with the justification that her career needed the space while I merely wanted it. When I refused, pointing out that I had worked extremely hard for everything I owned, my mother began to cry. "We always knew you resented your sister, but we never thought you'd be this cruel," my father added. "A real man would step up and help his family in need." I excused myself from the table, realizing that no amount of explanation would penetrate their distorted perception. Outside the restaurant, I texted them that I needed space and would be limiting contact until they could respect my boundaries. Their response was to accuse me of abandoning family just like you abandoned your sister. Upon returning home, I contacted a security consultant to upgrade my apartment's systems. New cameras were installed at all entry points, along with an enhanced alarm system connected directly to my phone. The property management company was provided with explicit instructions that no one was to be granted access to my unit without my direct verification, regardless of claimed family relationships. These precautions proved prescient. Just 2 weeks later, the concierge called to inform me that my sister had arrived, claiming she had permission to collect some belongings she had left behind. Thanks to my explicit instructions, he had refused entry and suggested she contact me directly. When I checked the lobby security footage later, I could see Amanda's visible frustration as she was turned away. That night, I received a string of text messages from Amanda, alternating between pleas for reconciliation and thinly veiled threats. "We could solve this so easily if you would just be reasonable," one message read. "You're forcing me to take measures I don't want to take," read another. I documented everything, but did not respond, following the advice of a lawyer friend who suggested maintaining a clear record while avoiding engagement. My parents continued their pressure campaign with daily calls and messages accusing me of cruelty and selfishness. They suggested family therapy, but when I spoke with the therapist they had selected, it became clear she had already been provided with a skewed version of events and was operating under the assumption that I needed to work through my jealousy issues regarding my sister. The stress began affecting my work performance and mental health. I found myself constantly checking security alerts on my phone and having trouble sleeping. After a particularly difficult week where I nearly missed crucial deadlines due to distraction, I decided to take a 2-week vacation, my first in years. I told no one in my family about this break, needing time to clear my head and reevaluate the situation without constant pressure. During this period of reflection, I came to the painful realization that maintaining a relationship with my family as it currently stood was harmful to my well-being. I made the difficult decision to temporarily cut all contact, blocking their numbers and social media accounts. I also retained a lawyer to send a formal cease and desist letter to Amanda regarding her misleading online posts and harassment. The night before returning to work, I felt a sense of resolution and peace for the first time in months. I had taken concrete steps to protect myself both legally and emotionally. What I could not have anticipated was that Amanda's entitlement and determination to claim what she believed she deserved would lead to actions that would cross the line from familial conflict into criminal behavior. The cease and desist letter had an unexpected effect on Amanda's strategy. Rather than continuing her public campaign, she shifted to a more insidious approach. I discovered through mutual connections that she had started telling people I was experiencing mental health issues and had become paranoid about family. According to her narrative, my condition explained why I was hoarding the penthouse and refusing to help her. This new angle was particularly effective with extended family members who had known me primarily as a quiet, work-focused individual. My Aunt Carol called expressing concern about my breakdown and offering to help me find appropriate treatment. When I explained that I was perfectly stable but dealing with Amanda's manipulative behavior, she seemed skeptical. "Amanda has always been so open about her struggles," she said. "She's worried sick about you, Louis." Meanwhile, Amanda had somehow obtained my work email and began sending messages to my colleagues and supervisors expressing concern about my mental state and suggesting they should check on me. These emails were carefully worded to seem well-intentioned while planting seeds of doubt about my stability. Fortunately, my track record at the firm and solid relationships with management prevented these attempts from causing professional damage. But the boundary violation was deeply disturbing. The situation took another turn when I discovered Amanda had created a private social media group for family and friends titled Supporting Louis Through Crisis. In this group, she positioned herself as the concerned sister trying to help a brother who was pushing away those who cared about him. She shared updates on my supposed deterioration and solicited advice on how to intervene before I lost everything to my paranoia. Several distant relatives and family friends I hadn't spoken to in years began reaching out their messages dripping with condescension and concern. "We're here for you when you're ready to accept help," read one message. "Sometimes the strongest people have the hardest time admitting they're struggling," read another. Each interaction left me feeling increasingly isolated and gaslit. Through all this, my parents remained firmly in Amanda's corner. My mother called from a blocked number to circumvent my contact restrictions, leaving a voicemail suggesting they were considering legal options to have me evaluated for competency. "We're worried you might not be capable of making sound decisions right now," she said, her voice breaking in what sounded like rehearsed emotion. "Amanda has found some resources for families dealing with adult children in crisis." The audacity of this approach was staggering. By positioning me as mentally unstable, Amanda had created a situation where any defense I mounted could be dismissed as further evidence of my supposed condition. If I responded calmly and rationally, I was in denial. If I responded with justified anger, I was having an episode. It was a no-win scenario designed to undermine my credibility and autonomy. Around this time, I received an invitation to a family dinner at my Uncle Robert's home. Uncle Robert had always been somewhat neutral in family dynamics, so I cautiously accepted, hoping for an ally or at least a rational perspective. The dinner, like the previous one with my parents, quickly revealed itself as an intervention. Seated around the dining table were my parents, Amanda, Uncle Robert, and his wife, and a man introduced as Dr. Lawrence, a family friend who I later discovered was a psychiatrist. Amanda had consulted. The conversation began pleasantly enough with casual catching up, but soon shifted to concerns about my isolation and paranoid behaviors. Dr. Lawrence, despite never having met or treated me, began asking leading questions about my sleep patterns, whether I was hearing voices, and if I believed people were out to get me. When I pointed out the impropriety of attempting an unofficial diagnosis in a social setting, he exchanged meaningful glances with my parents, as if my objection confirmed their concerns. "Louis, we're all here because we love you," Amanda said, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled away and she continued, "This isn't about the apartment anymore. We're worried you're having some kind of breakdown. The Louis I grew up with would never treat family this way." The gaslighting was so blatant I almost laughed. "The Amanda I grew up with never tried to steal my home or convince our family I was mentally ill to get what she wanted." I responded calmly. "This entire setup is inappropriate and manipulative." My father interjected. "See, this is exactly what we're talking about. These paranoid accusations, this hostility. You need help, son." I stood up, maintaining as much composure as possible. "What I need is for all of you to respect my boundaries. Amanda has never contributed to my success, has no claim to my property, and is not entitled to my home regardless of her perceived needs. I'm leaving now. Please don't contact me again until you're ready to interact with me based in reality." As I walked out, I heard Amanda say to the group, "This is worse than I thought. He's completely detached from reality." Driving home, I realized the depth of the situation I was facing. My sister wasn't just envious or temporarily entitled. She was engaged in a comprehensive campaign to discredit and undermine me in order to gain control of my assets. My parents, whether through manipulation or their own dysfunctional perspective, were active participants in this effort. Upon reaching my building, I spoke with the head of security, explaining the situation in detail and providing photos of Amanda, my parents, and other family members who might attempt to gain access under false pretenses. I upgraded the security system again, adding motion sensors and additional cameras inside the apartment itself. I began documenting every interaction, saving emails, text messages, and recording phone calls where legally permitted. I also started seeing a legitimate therapist both to help process the emotional impact of these events and to establish a professional record of my mental state. Dr. Mitchell, a respected psychologist specializing in family dynamics and personality disorders, provided validation that was crucial during this period. What you're describing, he told me during our third session, contains many hallmarks of narcissistic family systems and gaslighting. With Dr. Mitchell's guidance, I began to recognize patterns in my family's behavior that had existed long before the current conflict. Amanda's extreme sense of entitlement, my parents' enablement of her demands, regardless of reason, and the family-wide pattern of reality distortion to maintain this dynamic were not new. The Penthouse situation had merely amplified tendencies that had always been present. I took additional precautions, scheduling a comprehensive physical and mental health evaluation with independent doctors to create documentation of my well-being. I provided my lawyer with power of attorney in case of emergency and updated my will to explicitly exclude Amanda from any inheritance with clear explanations of why this decision was made while I was of sound mind and under no duress. These measures gave me some peace of mind, but the constant vigilance was exhausting. I found myself jumping at notifications from my security system and scrutinizing the intentions behind every interaction. The psychological toll of being treated as unstable by those who should know you best cannot be overstated. There were moments I found myself questioning my own perception, despite all evidence supporting my version of reality. The campaign continued for several weeks, with Amanda periodically testing my boundaries. She attempted to contact colleagues, friends, and even clients under various pretexts. She showed up at restaurants where I had reservations, claiming coincidence, but clearly following my movements somehow. Each encounter was documented and added to the growing file my lawyer maintained. Throughout this ordeal, I maintained my professional responsibilities and even managed to secure a significant new client for the firm. This achievement, which would normally have been a moment of pride and celebration, was overshadowed by the constant stress of Amanda's machinations. I found little joy in the success, too preoccupied with protecting myself from the next attack. What I didn't realize was that Amanda's frustration with her failing efforts would soon push her to cross a line that would change everything. Her sense of entitlement had grown so profound, her conviction that she deserved my home so unshakable, that she was prepared to take direct action to claim what she believed was rightfully hers. The events that followed would finally bring clarity to a situation that had become increasingly surreal. The piercing sound of my phone's security alert jolted me awake at 2:15 in the morning. Disoriented and half asleep, I grabbed the device to see multiple motion alerts from the building's lobby camera. Tapping the notification revealed a live feed that instantly cleared any remaining drowsiness from my mind. There, arguing with the night doorman, was Amanda, accompanied by an older man carrying what appeared to be locksmith tools. I watched in disbelief as Amanda gesticulated dramatically, pointing toward the elevators, while the man stood uncomfortably beside her. The doorman maintained his position, blocking their path, phone in hand, presumably contacting building security. Though I couldn't hear the exchange, Amanda's body language conveyed escalating frustration. Switching to another camera angle, I activated the audio feed just in time to hear Amanda saying, "I told you I live here and I lost my keys. My brother changed the locks without telling me and I need to get into my own home. I have identification that shows this address." The locksmith shifted nervously, looking between Amanda and the doorman. "Ma'am, you said this was your apartment and you were locked out. If there's some kind of dispute about residency, I can't get involved." My hands trembling slightly, I called the building's security desk. "This is Lewis Wilson from the Penthouse. There's a woman in the lobby claiming to be a resident of my unit. She is my estranged sister and has no legal right to access my home. Please, do not allow her upstairs under any circumstances, and call the police immediately." The security manager assured me they were already contacting the authorities and would maintain the situation until officers arrived. I ended the call and continued watching the feed, my heart pounding, as I witnessed Amanda's increasingly desperate attempts to persuade the building staff. "This is ridiculous. I've been living here for months," she shouted, now pulling out her wallet. "Look, I have ID. This is my address too." The doorman calmly examined whatever identification she presented, then handed it back with a shake of his head. "I'm sorry, miss, but according to our records, you are not listed as a resident of this building. The owner of the unit has explicitly stated that you do not have permission to enter. The police have been called, and I suggest you wait for them to sort this out." The mention of police caused a visible shift in Amanda's demeanor. She grabbed the locksmith's arm and attempted to pull him toward the exit, but two security guards had positioned themselves by the doors. "This is all a misunderstanding," she said, her voice now honeyed with forced calm. "We'll just come back tomorrow when my brother is available to clear things up." I called the police myself to ensure they understood the situation, providing details about Amanda's previous threats and the ongoing harassment. "I have video evidence of the attempt to illegally enter my property," I explained to the dispatcher. She brought a locksmith under false pretenses, claiming to be a resident. While waiting for police to arrive, I threw on clothes and prepared the documentation I had been gathering, including the cease and desist letter records of Amanda's previous attempts to gain access to the building and text messages containing veiled threats. I also called my lawyer's emergency line, leaving a detailed message about the situation. On the security feed, I watched as two police officers entered the lobby. Amanda immediately approached them, speaking rapidly and gesturing toward the elevators. Her entire demeanor had transformed, tears now streaming down her face as she presented what appeared to be a victim's narrative. The locksmith stood awkwardly to the side, clearly regretting his involvement in the situation. I decided to go downstairs rather than wait for the officers to come up. Entering the lobby, I heard Amanda mid-sentence, "And he's been struggling with serious mental health issues. We're all so worried about him. I just need to check on him and get some of my things from the apartment we share." "That's completely false," I stated calmly as I approached. "Officers, I'm Lewis Wilson, the sole owner and resident of the Penthouse unit. This woman is my estranged sister who has been harassing me for months in an attempt to gain control of my property. She has never lived here and has no belongings in my home." One officer, a sergeant based on his insignia, turned to me. "Sir, your sister claims she's been living here and that you recently changed the locks without notice." "I can provide documentation proving I'm the sole owner and occupant," I replied, opening the folder I had brought. "I also have security footage showing multiple attempts by her to gain unauthorized access to the building. Tonight she brought a locksmith under false pretenses, claiming to live here and to have lost her keys." The sergeant reviewed my documentation while his partner spoke separately with the locksmith. "Ma'am," the sergeant finally addressed. "Amanda, do you have any documentation showing this as your legal residence? Mail, utility bills, rental agreement?" Amanda's confidence faltered. I've been staying with my brother informally. We had a verbal agreement about sharing the space." "That's not true," I interjected. "She stayed as a guest for approximately 3 weeks over 4 months ago. Since then, she has made repeated attempts to claim ownership or residence rights to my property without any legal basis." The locksmith, now speaking with the officers, confirmed that Amanda had called his emergency service, claiming to be locked out of her own apartment. She said she lived here and had ID with this address. I had no reason to doubt her until the doorman stopped us. The officers examined Amanda's ID, which I later learned she had falsified to show my address. They also reviewed the building's resident records and security footage I had documented over the previous months. As the evidence mounted against her version of events, Amanda's strategy shifted yet again. "Louis has been under tremendous stress," she said, voice breaking. "He's not thinking clearly. Our parents are very concerned about his mental state. I was just trying to check on him because he hasn't been responding to family. Officers, I have documentation from licensed mental health professionals confirming my sound mental state," I responded, producing the evaluations I had obtained. "This claim about my mental health is part of an ongoing campaign to discredit me and gain control of my property." After reviewing all available evidence, the police determined that Amanda had knowingly misrepresented herself to the locksmith and building staff in an attempt to gain unauthorized access to my home. The falsified ID with my address provided clear intent to deceive, They informed her that she was being placed under arrest for attempted breaking and entering and possession of a forged identification document. As they led Amanda away in handcuffs, the mask of victimhood completely fell away. "You'll regret this, Lewis," she hissed. "No one will believe you didn't set me up. Our parents will never forgive you for this." The locksmith, visibly shaken by the ordeal, apologized profusely. "I had no idea, sir. She was so convincing about living here. In 15 years of emergency calls, I've never been used like this." After providing my formal statement to the officers and ensuring they had copies of all relevant documentation, I returned to my apartment, adrenaline still coursing through my system. The reality of what had just occurred was difficult to process. My own sister had attempted to break into my home in the middle of the night, using false identification and manipulating an innocent service provider in the process. Within an hour of returning to my unit, my phone exploded with notifications. My parents had been contacted about Amanda's arrest, and their response was predictably distorted. Rather than recognizing the severity and inappropriateness of her actions, they placed the blame squarely on me. "How could you have your own sister arrested?" my father demanded in a voicemail. "What kind of man calls the police on family? You've gone too far this time, Louis." My mother's message was equally devoid of reality. "Amanda was just worried about you. She's been telling us how isolated you've become, how you won't respond to anyone's concern. Now you've humiliated her with this arrest. I never raised my son to be so cruel." I did not respond to either message, forwarding them instead to my lawyer and therapist as further documentation of the family dynamic. The night's events had provided painful but necessary clarity. There was no misunderstanding to resolve, no reasonable middle ground to find. Amanda's sense of entitlement had become so profound that she believed criminal actions were justified to get what she wanted, and my parents were so committed to their distorted perception that they would defend those actions rather than confront reality. As dawn broke over the city skyline, I sat on my terrace watching the early light illuminate Central Park. The home that had once represented my greatest achievement now felt tainted by conflict and invasion. Yet beneath the lingering anxiety and sadness, a strange sense of liberation was beginning to emerge. The situation had escalated beyond any possibility of rationalization or reconciliation, forcing me to accept a truth. I had been resisting. The family I had been trying to please did not truly exist and never had. The weeks following Amanda's arrest were a blur of legal proceedings and emotional processing. Amanda was charged with attempted breaking and entering, possession of forged identification documents, and violation of the cease and desist order. Given the clear evidence and her prior harassment, the court granted me a permanent restraining order prohibiting her from coming within 500 feet of my home or workplace. Despite the seriousness of her actions, Amanda received a relatively light sentence due to her lack of prior criminal record. She was placed on probation for 18 months, required to complete community service hours, and ordered to attend counseling. The judge made it clear that any violation of the restraining order would result in immediate jail time. Throughout this process, my parents remained steadfastly in Amanda's corner. They attended every hearing, sitting behind her in silent support while casting reproachful glances my way. They hired an expensive attorney who attempted to frame the incident as a family misunderstanding rather than a premeditated criminal act. When this strategy failed to prevent legal consequences, my father approached me outside the courthouse. "You could have dropped the charges," he said, his voice cold. "Instead, you've given your sister a criminal record that will follow her for life. I hope whatever point you're trying to make was worth destroying her future." Amanda gave herself a criminal record when she decided to forge documents and attempt to break into my home. I replied calmly. "Her actions have consequences, just like anyone else's would." "She's your sister," my mother interjected, tears welling. "Family forgives. Forgiveness doesn't mean allowing someone to violate your boundaries or take what isn't theirs," I responded. "I'm enforcing healthy boundaries, which is something this family has never understood." That conversation marked the last direct interaction I had with my parents. Through my lawyer, I communicated that I would be open to contact only if they acknowledged the reality of the situation and respected my autonomy. So far, they have chosen to maintain their distorted narrative, instead sending occasional messages that continue to frame me as the villain in a story where I am actually the victim. The emotional aftermath of these events was challenging to navigate. For months, I experienced anxiety, hypervigilance, and occasional panic attacks. Ordinary activities like answering the door or receiving unexpected calls triggered an adrenaline response. Even with the legal protections in place, part of me remained braced for the next attack or boundary violation. Dr. Mitchell, my therapist, was instrumental in helping me work through these reactions. What you're experiencing is a normal response to prolonged manipulation and boundary violations, he explained, during one particularly difficult session. Your brain and body are still in protection mode because the threat felt constant and unpredictable for so long. Through our weekly sessions, I began to unpack not just the recent trauma but the lifelong family dynamic that had set the stage for it. I came to understand how my parents' consistent prioritization of Amanda's desires over basic fairness or reality had created the perfect environment for narcissistic entitlement to flourish. I also recognized my own patterns of seeking validation from people fundamentally incapable of providing it. You spent your life trying to earn recognition from people who defined your role as the self-sufficient one who needs nothing, Dr. Mitchell observed. No achievement could ever change that perception because it wasn't based on your actions in the first place. It was based on the role they needed you to play in the family system. This insight was both painful and liberating. The standards had been impossible by design, the approval I sought fundamentally unavailable. No penthouse, no promotion, no achievement would ever have been enough to change my assigned role in the family narrative. Understanding this allowed me to begin the process of detaching my sense of self-worth from their validation. Rebuilding my life after this family fracture meant intentionally creating new connections and strengthening existing ones that were healthy and reciprocal. I reached out to colleagues I had always kept at arm's length due to my workaholic tendencies. I joined a community volunteer organization focused on financial literacy for underprivileged youth, using my skills to make a meaningful difference while connecting with like-minded individuals. Through these new activities, I developed friendships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or history. For perhaps the first time, I allowed people to know the authentic version of me, not the perfect achiever I had tried to be for my family or the cold finance professional I had presented to keep others at a distance. 6 months after Amanda's arrest, I received an unexpected email from my father's brother, Uncle James, who had been estranged from our family for over a decade. He had heard about the situation through extended family and reached out to share his own experience. What you've described about Amanda and your parents sounds eerily similar to what I experienced with your father and grandmother years ago, he wrote. The golden child dynamic, the reality distortion, the entitlement. It's a pattern that goes back generations. Uncle James and I began corresponding regularly and eventually met for dinner when his business brought him to New York. Hearing his stories provided context for my experiences and validated my decision to maintain boundaries. He had walked away from the family 20 years earlier after a similar situation involving business property and had built a fulfilling life, despite being labeled the villain in the family narrative. The hardest part is accepting that they may never see reality, he told me as we shared dessert. You keep thinking that if you just explain clearly enough, present enough evidence, they'll have to acknowledge the truth. But that's not how these dynamics work. The distortion isn't a misunderstanding. It's a necessary protection for their self-image and family structure. His words resonated deeply, helping me release the lingering hope that my parents would eventually recognize the truth of the situation. This acceptance, though painful, allowed me to focus on building my life forward rather than continually looking back for validation that would never come. As the 1-year anniversary of the break-in attempt approached, I found myself in a significantly different emotional place. The anxiety had largely subsided, replaced by a calm acceptance of the reality of my family situation. I had established clear boundaries and enforced them consistently. I had built new connections based on authenticity rather than performance or obligation. Most importantly, I had come to recognize my own worth, independent of external validation. My penthouse, once tainted by conflict, gradually reclaimed its place as a sanctuary rather than a battleground. I redecorated certain areas that held negative associations, creating a space that fully reflected my tastes and preferences without consideration for anyone else's judgment. What had been a symbol of achievement became something more meaningful, a home where I felt safe, comfortable, and at peace. Professionally, the focus I regained after resolving the family situation allowed me to take on new challenges. I was offered a partnership track at the firm recognition of both my financial acumen and my recently developed leadership qualities. The colleague who nominated me specifically mentioned my increased ability to connect authentically with clients and team members, a skill that had emerged only as I began to drop the protective armor I had worn for so long. On quiet evenings, sitting on my terrace overlooking the park, I sometimes reflect on the journey that brought me here. The path was more difficult and painful than I could have imagined, involving losses I never anticipated. Yet the clarity and peace I've found on the other side have their own profound value. I've learned that true family is defined by mutual respect, honesty, and support, not by blood relation or obligation. I've discovered that boundaries are not selfish but necessary for healthy relationships. Most importantly, I've come to understand that my worth is inherent, not earned, through achievement, or granted by others' approval. The experience with Amanda and my parents, though traumatic, ultimately forced me to confront and break patterns that would have limited me throughout my life. In losing the family I thought I needed, I gained the freedom to build the life I truly deserve, populated by people who value me for who I am, rather than what I can provide or what role I can play in their narrative. If there's one thing I would share with others facing similar situations, it's this: toxic entitlement doesn't improve with concession. Each boundary you relax will lead to demands for more. Each sacrifice will be taken for granted rather than appreciated. Real love doesn't require you to diminish yourself to elevate someone else. Real family, whether biological or chosen, lifts you up rather than tears you down. So what's your experience with family entitlement? Have you ever had to set firm boundaries with loved ones who couldn't respect your achievements or property? Drop a comment below sharing your story. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me continue sharing these life lessons that might help others facing similar struggles. Remember, sometimes the family we choose is more supportive than the one we're born into. Thank you for listening, and take care of yourselves out there.